The battleship didn't just leave harbor, it stepped into legend. A steel giant slid into the gray water of the North Sea. Cold wind hit the flags. Crowds on the quay fell silent. This ship carried a name that already weighed a ton. Bismarck. 3 years of work forged her. Thousands of hands built her hull plate by plate. Engineers checked every cable. Workers crawled through every frame. She looked massive, even on the slipway. Her bow cut the air like a cliff. Her sides gleamed under weak winter sun. On the day of her launch, power gathered on the shore. Officers in crisp uniforms, party leaders with fixed smiles. Even Hitler came to watch. He looked at the gray hulk in the water. He saw a symbol he could sell to a nation. A young woman stepped forward with a bottle of champagne. She was the granddaughter of Otto von Bismarck. The old Iron Chancellor gave the ship his name. The bottle smashed against the steel. Glass shattered. Foam ran down the hull. The crowd roared. The ship slid free. Bismarck touched the water for the first time. Germany now had a new promise of sea power. Newspapers spoke about invincibility. Cartoons showed a beast of steel that owned the ocean. Sailors who received orders for Bismarck felt something different. They saw not just a ship, but a moving fortress. They believed this gray monster could carry them through any storm. Months turned into years of fitting out. Guns went into place. Radars and rangefinders grew like strange metal eyes. Bismarck carried 8 15-inch guns and 4 huge turrets. Each shell weighed as much as a small car. Each hit could tear open a cruiser. Armor wrapped her vital spaces. Thick belt plates guarded her sides. The armored deck formed a hard shield over magazines and engines. She could steam for 10,000 miles without refueling. Her turbines pushed her through waves at high speed. On paper, she looked close to perfect. But paper never meets real seas. Real seas always argue. During trials, the crew discovered a stubborn truth. The ship didn't answer the helm easily. Her great mass fought every turn. Even small course changes took time. Every big maneuver needed planning. Every narrow channel became a test. Officers wrote report after report. They noted problems with steering. They marked delays in response. Machinery teams crawled around the steering gear. They checked lines. They checked hydraulics. Bismarck could turn. But she turned like a giant. Slow to start, hard to stop. Outside the shipyard, the world changed. War swept across Europe. Poland fell. France collapsed. Britain stood alone behind a ring of sea. Its lifeline stretched over cold Atlantic water. Convoys carried food, fuel, and weapons. Those slow merchant ships were soft targets. Submarines attacked them from below. Aircraft attacked from above. Now, German admirals wanted something more. They wanted a surface raider that could smash convoys. They wanted a ship that could kill fast, then vanish. Bismarck looked like the answer, a steel hammer to strike at British trade, a threat that forced the Royal Navy to scatter its strength. By the summer of 1940, Bismarck finally joined the fleet. Her captain was Ernst Lindemann. He was strict, calm, and deeply professional. He knew his ship's power. He also knew its flaws. He saw a weapon with both teeth and weak joints. The crew drilled every day. Gunners practiced loading and aiming. Fire control teams practiced feeding data to the guns. Engineers tested the turbines and boilers. Radar operators learned their new sets. Lookouts scanned empty horizons until their eyes hurt. Yet Bismarck still spent long weeks stuck in harbors and channels. Icy winters froze narrow passages. Accidents blocked key canals. Other German ships crowded docks and repair yards. There weren't enough berths. There wasn't enough time. Sailors grew restless. Their ship felt like a caged animal. Its claws stayed dry. But British and American intelligence officers didn't relax. They tracked every rumor. They stared at every blurry photograph. They knew that one day Bismarck would reach the open ocean. On that day, every convoy route would feel more dangerous. On that day, someone might have to trade ships and blood to stop her. Spring came again. In 1941, patience in Berlin ran out. The ship had to fight now or never. High Command gave the operation a name, Rheinübung, Exercise Rhine. The plan looked simple on paper. Bismarck and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen would break into the Atlantic. They would hunt merchant convoys. Other big German ships weren't ready. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau sat damaged in French ports. Tirpitz still waited for final work in the shipyard. So Bismarck and Prinz Eugen would go almost alone. Speed and surprise would be their shields. The ocean's size would be their hiding place. On May 18, 1941, the ships slipped away from the Baltic base at Gotenhafen. Gray sky hung low. Water looked like beaten metal. Destroyers escorted them at first. Their smaller hulls bounced in the swell. Their wakes crossed like white scars. The plan led them north, along the coast of Norway. Fog and bad weather would cover them. Cliffs and fjords would hide them from enemy eyes. For a while, the plan worked. Then, in the narrow waters of the Kattegat, neutral eyes saw them. A Swedish cruiser spotted 2 large warships and passed a quiet note. Intelligence doesn't sleep in wartime. The report flowed through Swedish channels. It crossed desks and borders. Soon, in London, officers read it with cold focus. A big German force had left the Baltic. There weren't many candidates. British Admiralty rooms grew tense. Bismarck had likely sailed. The Atlantic might gain a new predator. On Bismarck's bridge, Admiral Gunther Lutyens held command of the task force. He heard about the Swedish sighting. He weighed his options. He could turn back and abandon the mission. He could seek a different route. He chose risk. Lutyens even refused to fully refuel Bismarck in Norway. He didn't want delays in vulnerable waters. Every extra hour near enemy airfields meant more danger. So the ships pressed on. Forward watch crews stared into gray mist. Radar sets turned and hummed. The most dangerous point lay ahead, the Denmark Strait, a cold gap between Greenland and Iceland. There, currents clashed, fog banked. Ice sometimes drifted into dark water. It was also the likely place for an interception. The Royal Navy knew Bismarck's possible routes. They had their own ships at sea. On May 23, 1941, Bismarck and Prinz Eugen approached the strait. Wind drove low clouds across the sea. Visibility changed by the minute. Operators in Bismarck's radar room caught a faint echo. Something big moved out there, not waves, not ice. Soon, lookouts spotted shapes in the haze. A cruiser off the port bow. Another not far away. These were the British heavy cruisers Suffolk and Norfolk. They didn't close to fight at once. They shadowed the Germans from a distance. Shells from Bismarck's guns roared out across the water. Great columns of spray leapt near the British cruisers, but the enemy kept away, always turning aside. The cruisers carried radar. They could track Bismarck through fog. They sent constant updates by radio. Their messages reached Britain fast. Admirals in London saw the pattern. The German battleship had broken into the Denmark Strait. This was the moment they had feared. Orders crackled out across the network. Force after force received the same command. Find Bismarck. Stop her. From Iceland, the battlecruiser Hood and the new battleship Prince of Wales steamed to intercept. Hood was old but still loved. She represented pride built after the last war. Prince of Wales still had civilian workers on board. Some of her guns weren't fully tested, but there was no time to wait. The ocean that night felt like a giant chessboard. Every move could be fatal. Every guess could save a convoy or lose a fleet. On Bismarck, sailors lived minute by minute. They slept in short bursts. They ate whenever they could. Engines thundered far below the waterline. Steel decks vibrated under marching boots. Guns sat ready. Officers knew a clash was now almost certain. The enemy had located them. The British fleet had too much pride to let this pass. Dawn on May 24th came cold and gray over the Denmark Strait. Wind slapped waves against Bismarck's hull. Spray froze on exposed rails. At 5:45 in the morning, the calm broke. Lookouts high on the mast shouted down, smoke on the horizon, then darker shapes. The British had arrived. Hood and Prince of Wales came in fast. Their bows punched through the swell. On Bismarck's bridge, men focused on range and bearing. The air smelled of oil, cold steel, and nervous sweat. Hands gripped binoculars too tightly. The British ships opened fire first. Hood's big guns spat flames. Huge shells arced toward the German line. Spray exploded near Prinz Eugen. Water shot high and crashed back down. Bismarck held her fire for a moment. Then Lindemann gave the order. Bismarck's forward turrets spoke. The whole ship shook. 15-inch shells cut long paths through the morning air. They fell near Hood and Prince of Wales. Plumes of water climbed like gray trees. Prince Eugen's medium guns found the range first. Shells ripped into Hood's upper works. A fire started on her deck. Hood pressed on. Her crew trusted armor and speed. They wanted to get close and hit hard, but range and angle mattered. Bismarck's gunners adjusted their fire. The next salvos came in flatter and deadlier. On Hood, some sailors saw a sudden glare. A shell pierced her deck near a magazine. For 1 second, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ship opened from within. Flame roared out of her center. Hood exploded. The blast tore her almost in two. A great column of fire and smoke shot into the sky. Fragments and men flew into cold air. In less than 3 minutes, Britain's proudest ship vanished beneath the waves. Only 3 men out of more than 1,400 survived. The sea closed over burned steel and broken lives. On Bismarck, silence fell for a heartbeat. Even hardened sailors stared. They hadn't expected the giant to die that fast. Then battle dragged them back. Prince of Wales still fought. Her guns fired again. Shells from the British battleship found their mark. One slammed into Bismarck's bow. It tore through the side and caused flooding. Other hits shook the superstructure. Equipment smashed. Men fell. But Bismarck and Prince Eugen kept up their fire. Prince of Wales took hits on her bridge and turrets. Her captain knew he couldn't stay in that killing zone. Smoke poured from shattered parts of her hull. She turned away and laid a smoke screen. Her guns still fired, but she retreated. The fight in the Denmark Strait ended. Bismarck stood alone on the battlefield she had just changed forever. The sea calmed, but the war around her didn't. The price of victory was clear. Hood lay on the bottom, but Bismarck bled from her nose. Flooding at the bow slowed her. Water entered forward compartments. Men pumped and shored up bulkheads. Fuel lines had taken damage, too. The ship leaked precious oil into the sea. A long, dark stain trailed behind her. That slick spelled doom. What seemed like a wound looked like a beacon from the air. Any patrol plane could follow it. In London, news of Hood's loss hit like a hammer. The public didn't yet know. But inside Navy headquarters, faces hardened. Prime Minister Winston Churchill received the message. He listened. He understood what it meant for morale and for the war. He gave a short order. Every captain and every sailor would hear some version of it. Sink the Bismarck. That sentence turned anger into action. Admirals pushed every available ship into the chase. pride now mixed with cold need. Battleships left ports with little rest. Older ships of the Revenge class took up positions. King George V and other heavy units moved to cut off routes to France. Cruisers tightened their shadowing track. Suffolk and Norfolk clung to Bismarck at the edge of vision. They used radar when fog hid everything else. Aircraft from coastal bases searched the sea. Long-range flying boats combed the waves. Radio operators strained to read every faint signal. Bismarck's crew felt the net tightening. They knew British ships followed them. They could see shells splash from time to time as the cruisers probed. Admiral Lütjens made a hard choice. He detached Prince Eugen to continue hunting on her own. Bismarck would draw the main enemy force. Some officers disagreed quietly. They wanted to keep the group together. But the order stood. Bismarck turned toward the French coast. If she could reach a harbor there, German aircraft could protect her. Repairs could patch her wounds. The distance didn't look huge on a chart. In reality, it was a lifetime. Every hour brought enemies closer. Seas built around the damaged bow. Water slammed into the crippled front. The ship pounded through it but wasted fuel. Below decks, teams fought the flooding. They set more pumps. They reinforced bulkheads with new timbers and steel. Men worked soaked and freezing. Their hands numbed. They slipped on oil and salt. The bridge stayed tense. Every new report from lookouts mattered. Every radar contact drew quick discussion. Night fell over the Atlantic. Dark clouds erased the horizon. Search planes had to pull back. But other hunters stepped in. Destroyers from the Royal Navy moved closer. They weren't strong enough to fight a gun battle. They had torpedoes instead. In the small hours, gray hulls crept near Bismarck. Spray washed their decks. Men on their bridges peered into black rain. They attacked in waves. One destroyer went in, then another, then another. Torpedoes foamed toward the battleship. Bismarck's guns erupted again. Her secondary batteries lit the night. Tracer lines stitched the dark. Shells fell into water near the destroyers. Splashes towered. Shock waves shook thin hulls. But luck stayed with Bismarck for the moment. Those torpedoes missed or struck too shallow. The giant survived the night attacks. The price came in exhaustion. Her crew hadn't slept properly for days. Eyes stung. Hands shook at their posts. Every new alarm dragged men back to full alert. Every break they grabbed lasted just minutes. Even the ship's strong steel seemed to groan. Then the worst blow came from the air. On May 26th, British patrol aircraft finally found Bismarck again. A flying boat spotted that long, black fuel trail stretching across the sea. Radio messages leapt from cockpit to base, from base to fleet, from fleet to an aircraft carrier named Ark Royal. Ark Royal had old-fashioned biplanes aboard. Swordfish. Slow, fabric-covered, underpowered. Pilots joked about them in peacetime. Now, those clumsy-looking planes would decide a battle. The first strike made a mistake. Swordfish pilots attacked the wrong target. They went after a British cruiser in bad weather. Torpedoes splashed into empty water. Crews on both sides cursed and breathed again. No one got hit. Swordfish squadrons rearmed and tried again near dusk. Rain slashed across their open cockpits. Waves rolled like long gray hills. Pilots flew low, just over the wave tops. Spray hit their goggles. Engines struggled in the wind. Then they saw Bismarck. Her bulk loomed through rain. Her anti-aircraft guns woke with fury. Explosions dotted the sky. Flashes lit gray clouds. Fragments of metal tore the air. Torpedoes dropped into the sea and streaked forward. Some ran too deep. Some missed. But not all. One hit along the armored side. The heavy belt shrugged off most of the damage. Men still staggered, but the ship held. Another torpedo struck nearer the bow. Flooding grew worse, yet the ship could still steer. Hope flickered. Then one torpedo found the perfect, terrible spot. It smashed into the stern, near the rudders and propellers. The blast twisted vital machinery. In moments, Bismarck lost her ability to steer. Helm orders no longer turned her properly. The ship responded in slow, ugly arcs. Engineers ran to the steering compartments. They tried to free jammed rudder gear. They tried manual control. Down there, the noise deafened them. Water roared. Metal screamed against metal. They couldn't fix it. One rudder jammed hard over. The other couldn't overcome that force. Now, the great battleship sailed in wide circles. She couldn't hold a straight line. She couldn't escape south to the safety of air cover. On the bridge, Lutyens grasped the meaning fast. Without steering, they couldn't outrun the British. They couldn't choose the angle of any coming fight. He sent a message back to Germany. The words were simple and grim. The ship had lost steerage. They would fight until the last shell. That night ate at the crew's nerves. They knew what waited with the dawn. British heavy ships gathered just beyond sight. Destroyers still snapped at them through darkness. They launched more torpedoes. They fired guns when they dared. Bismarck's gunners kept them at a distance. Some destroyers took damage, but the noose stayed tight. On the upper decks, sailors looked out at black waves. Rain hit their faces. Some of them whispered short prayers. Others just stayed quiet. Below decks, men checked ammunition one last time. They passed shells. They checked fuses and hoists. First light on May 27th washed the scene in dirty gray. Clouds hung low. Wind blew steady. On the horizon, new shapes appeared. Battleships of the Royal Navy came into view. Rodney and King George V advanced with purpose. They turned to bring their full broadsides to bear. Their gun barrels pointed like long fingers at Bismarck's wounded form. Their captains knew this was their chance to end it. At 8:47 in the morning, Rodney opened fire. Her forward guns slammed out a full salvo. Moments later, King George V joined in. Huge shells crashed down around Bismarck. Water erupted high around her. Then the first heavy hits landed. One shell struck her forward fire control positions. Rangefinders shattered. Spotting instruments vanished in blasts. Another shell smashed into a turret. Armored housings cracked and twisted. Guns jammed or fell silent. Bismarck's crew still fought. They brought what guns they could to bear. Some salvos roared out blind without full control, but the jammed rudder kept throwing her off. Every roll and yaw ruined aim. Her hits became rare, then almost non-existent. British shells didn't stop. They came in volleys. They chewed down the superstructure. Masts fell. Radars broke. Secondary guns lay torn open. Fires burned along open decks. Smoke flooded passageways. Men crawled through darkness, dragging wounded shipmates. Turret after turret failed. First the bow guns, then the stern turrets. Eventually, Bismarck's great main battery became silent wreckage. She looked more like a burning island than a warship. Yet she still floated. British cruisers Norfolk and Dorsetshire closed in. Their smaller guns joined the pounding. Shells walked along Bismarck's hull. Some British officers began to feel uneasy. They weren't just beating a threat now, they were destroying a broken giant. But the order remained. Bismarck had to sink. The cost of Hood's loss demanded a clear end. A new set of torpedoes went into the water. Dorsetshire launched them at close range. White wakes streaked toward the crippled battleship. At least one torpedo hit. The shock ran through the wounded hull. Water rushed into already torn compartments. Inside Bismarck, German officers had made their own decision. They wouldn't let the ship become a prize. Scuttling charges went into place. Engineers opened sea connections. They flooded lower spaces on purpose. They killed what power they had left. Bismarck began to list heavily to port. Her remaining crew scrambled on sloping decks. Some slid toward the rail. Others jumped to escape flames and smoke. Cold Atlantic water swallowed them. Many never surfaced again. The battleship rolled onto her side. For a long, strange moment, her red-painted bottom showed to the sky. Then she slipped beneath the surface. Oil spread over the waves. Small pieces of wreckage floated. So did a few rafts and men in life jackets. British destroyers and cruisers lowered boats. They pulled some survivors from the freezing sea. Rough hands hauled soaked Germans onto heaving decks. Most of Bismarck's crew died where their ship went down. Over 2,000 men had sailed on her. Little more than 100 lived to tell the story. The hunt had ended. A single ship had forced a great fleet to gather. It had taken the full weight of an empire to bring her down. In Britain, newspaper headlines shouted about victory. They spoke about justice for Hood. They praised the Navy. In Germany, the mood felt very different. The loss of Bismarck hit hard. A symbol of power had lasted just 9 days at sea. Bismarck's short war left lessons written in steel and water. Armor alone couldn't guarantee survival. Speed and guns couldn't save a ship cut off and hunted. But her story also showed something else. How far a nation might go to destroy one threat. How fear and pride could move entire fleets. Today, her wreck lies deep under the Atlantic. Rust creeps over her hull. Cold currents move through shattered compartments. No voices echo in those flooded corridors now. No boots ring on those steel decks. Only quiet and dark surround her. Yet, when people speak about war at sea, Bismarck's name still returns. They remember the first voyage that turned into a legend. They remember the giant that forced a navy to swear one promise: sink the Bismarck, at all costs. And the ocean kept that promise.